Chappell Roan is taking major heat online for saying that most of her friends who are mothers have no light in their eyes. This clip is everywhere. I'm sure you've seen it by now. People are calling her ungrateful, judgmental, out of touch. But if you watch the full interview, you might see something different. Chappell wasn't being cruel. She was being kind of vulnerable. She was opening the door to a deeper conversation about queerness, identity, ambition, burnout, and the weight of gendered expectations. But that conversation never happened. Why? Because she said it on Call Her Daddy, where Alex Cooper, the host of the show, didn't even follow up, didn't probe, didn't even acknowledge the emotional complexity of what had just been said. She pivoted to whether Chappell's friends think her fame is wild or not. And that moment, so raw, so real, was left to spiral completely out of context. And that's the problem in a media landscape dominated by influencer-hosted podcasts and celebrity-led interviews. These fleeting flashes of truth, of depth, are either mishandled or missed entirely. We are watching the real-time slow death of the celebrity interview and of good music journalism. If you're new here, my name is Zach. I'm the Swiftologist. I make thoughtful weekly videos about pop culture, and I am a journalist and a cultural critic, and I love the craft of interviewing. I think that journalism at its best is an act of radical empathy. It's an exercise in seeing someone clearly, asking them the right questions, and listening to their responses with care. A good interview can change how we understand a person, a moment, even a generation. So in today's video, we're going to talk about what makes a good interview and what happens when that standard disappears. We'll break down the rise of influencer-led vibe checks like Call Her Daddy, analyzing the missed opportunities with Chappell Roan, and look at what we lose as a culture when no one's asking the hard questions anymore. I will also offer some good examples of what real interviews and good journalism is. I want to take a moment here and talk about the importance of music journalism, criticism, and actually, yes, challenging artists on their perspective and their creative decisions. Because even when you don't have direct access to the artist, which is more often the case these days, smart, thoughtful criticism is still possible and it still matters. It's how we build a record of cultural history, and it's also how we understand not just what an artist made, but why and what that says about the world that existed around them. One of my favorite examples of this is a legendary piece of writing from 1966, Frank Sinatra Has a Cold by Gay Talese. This article wasn't just a profile, it was a turning point. It pioneered a style called new journalism, which merged the immersive storytelling of fiction with the rigor of reporting. If you've ever read something in The New Yorker that felt more like a novel than a news story, but still felt grounded in reality, you're seeing the legacy of this piece. But here's the kicker. For this piece about Frank Sinatra that changed the world of journalism, Talese couldn't even get an interview with Frank Sinatra. He couldn't get access. But instead of giving up, he did something bold. He wrote around his subject. He hung out on the fringes of Frank Sinatra's entourage. He watched him move through rooms, noticed who orbited him and how they operated when they did it. And in doing so, he actually managed to paint a portrait that was more revealing than any sit-down Q&A ever could have been. There's this one image he created that stays with me. This is a quote from the piece. Frank Sinatra, holding a glass of bourbon in one hand and a cigarette in the other, stood in a dark corner of the bar between two attractive but fading blondes who sat waiting for him to say something. That's it. That's the journalist's eye. Talese wasn't there to flatter. He wasn't trying to be liked. He walked into that room looking for a story, not to make friends or go viral. That's the lens that a real interviewer should bring to their work. Observant, sharp, clear-eyed, and curious. And that is exactly what the new generation of influencer interviewers are missing. They might have the access that Talese never did to Frank Sinatra. They might have a bigger audience. They definitely have the platform. But what they don't have, and what most of them have never been trained to cultivate, is that kind of curiosity, that quiet hunger to understand something very deeply, the instinct to sit with a moment, to observe, to probe, to be silent, to notice. And because of that, they miss the story even when it's right in front of them. Talese's piece, written without permission, without direct quotes, without even a handshake from the subject, managed to reveal something essential about Frank Sinatra and about a generation's shifting expectations of fame, masculinity, and authenticity. It showed us a polished icon starting to fray at the edges, and it captured the slow fade of an era. And it did all of this without needing Sinatra to explain it himself. Now, why don't we take a more contemporary comparison? Let's look at another legendary moment in celebrity journalism, one that definitely represents the opposite extreme of what Gay Talese had to work with. In 2003, Diane Sawyer sat down with Britney Spears for an interview that has aged like milk, but still holds up as a cultural document of its time. Unlike Talese, who had no access to his subject, Sawyer had too much access. She was in Britney's house. She was spending days with her. She had the full backing of ABC News and this unfettered access to Britney Spears. And she also had the trust of the American public. And she used all of this to devastating personal effect for Britney Spears. This interview is a misogynistic, slut-shaming mess in hindsight, but it's a perfect time capsule of what the early 2000s expected from young women in the spotlight. Sawyer didn't just ask Britney questions, she interrogated her like she was on trial. She pushed aggressively on topics like sexuality, virginity, relationships, and her responsibility as a role model. She confronted her with the most cruel public comment I think that has ever been uttered about a pop star, from Kendall Ehrlich, who was then the wife of Maryland's governor, who said that she would shoot Britney Spears if given the chance. Rather than framing that as violent and unhinged, Sawyer used it as ammo to demand an emotional response. Britney, on national television, was expected to answer for and explain public misogyny. And here's what's complicated. Diane Sawyer was doing what interviewers are expected to do. She was asking the questions that America wanted asked at the time. She wasn't showing empathy, but she was doing her job. And this is told by the public's response. They loved it. Diane Sawyer now is, kind of held up as being the beast of journalism from the 2000s. But back then, she was praised for being tough, for holding Britney accountable. Looking at this through today's lens, it's ethically indefensible. But as a document of its moment, it's revealing about Britney, yes, but also about us. It shows us how fame functioned, how women were scrutinized, and how power operated in the media. That's something that we don't get anymore, because even flawed interviews like this have all but disappeared. In their place, we get safe, non-confrontational chats that barely scratch the surface. Diane Sawyer came into that room like Gay Talese did, as a bloodhound for a story. She didn't care if she came off cold or combative. She wasn't there to hold Britney Spears' hand. She was there to extract something from her subject and the conversation. Her tools were sharper, maybe even crueler, but she understood the assignment. She was looking to reveal something, and she did. We may not like how it was done, I certainly don't, but we can't deny that it got somewhere. And that's more than what we can say about most interviews being conducted today. This swing from zero access to over access tells us everything about the evolution of journalism that involves famous people. Talese's restraint and his patience let him see something true from the outside. Diane Sawyer's directness and relentlessness forced something true into the light in retrospect. But now we're in the era of the influencer hosted podcast, where the artist is never challenged. The interviewer is just happy to be there, and the story dies before it's even born. Music is by nature subjective, but the refusal to even engage with an artist's intent, their success, or their failures out of fear of making them or their fans uncomfortable makes for a very anemic cultural conversation. An interviewer's job isn't to coddle an artist, it's to push them to think critically about their own work. Without that friction, what we're left with is pure public relations, packaged as personality-driven content, where no one dares to say anything that might provoke some real thought. In 2024 and 2025, the pop star interview specifically has become an entirely different beast from either Gay Talese's profile or Diane Sawyer's interview with Britney Spears. Traditional sit-downs with seasoned journalists have been replaced by influencer-led podcasts, YouTube chats, and overly friendly conversations where nobody wants to step on toes. Instead of real insight into an artist's work, we get a 45-minute chat where the biggest question is, what's your favorite track on the album? This shift raises very important questions about how we are engaging with artists and how we document pop culture and what we're losing and whether we're losing something valuable in the way that we are talking about music at the moment. The art of interviewing, once a skill honed by professionals, has now been diluted by casual, often unprepared to say the least, hosts who lack the ability or the desire to push an artist beyond surface level conversation. Even worse, this issue is not exclusive to interviews. Too many interviews today suffer from main character syndrome by the interviewer, where the focus is just as much on the interviewer as it is on the artist. A great interviewer should make their presence virtually unknown or inject their personality in a way that adds to the conversation, guiding it in a way that elevates the subject rather than centering themselves and their own stories. Even seasoned interviewers, however, aren't immune to the gravitational pull of celebrity and the censorship that comes with that. No matter how experienced or skilled, many now seem more guided by the desire to maintain access or to preserve an artist's goodwill, or maybe they're afraid of the fan base, could be that too, than by the pursuit of a meaningful interview. Take, for example, Zane Lowe's recent interviews with Katy Perry. This was a golden opportunity to ask her about Woman's World, a single immediately met with backlash due to the hypocrisy of its messaging and her continued collaboration with Dr. Luke. That conversation, not the song itself, dominated the public reaction to her comeback. It was all anyone was talking about. And yet, Zane Lowe didn't even bring it up once. Instead, he fixated on affirming her persona, reiterating again and again that this was the Katy Perry that everyone loves, despite all evidence to the contrary, indulging her long tangents about manifestation, astrology, frequency, AI, and the spiritual power of music. The tone of their conversation was more wellness LA bullshit retreat than it was cultural analysis. There were two major interviews that he did. The first one focused on women's world, and I want to take a look at them both, which served as Katy's reintroduction. And the second one is a longer sit down that was tied to the actual album release of 143. Let's start with the women's world interview, where the elephant in the room, her renewed collaboration with Dr. Luke, was not just dodged, but seemingly erased from the conversation altogether.
It's clear that you are focused and passionate about the music you're making, and that you want to see it through at the highest level. And you know, of course, you're going to collaborate with people who are going to rise to that bar with you, but I can hear it in your performance. Like, I hear it the way you're singing. Like, it's like it means something to you in a big way every time. And this one definitely feels that way to me.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. Last time we spoke, I was heavily pregnant, and I had yet to give birth to the greatest love I've ever known,
Congratulations.
which has, thank you, formed and shaped and completed me. And I never knew, I mean, that was inside of me, or even that was, I was even capable of that.
Yeah.
So it's definitely changed me. And I think it unlocked a feminine divine inside of me that is just like transcendental, and it's a place that I'm operating from. And I feel like maybe I was operating a little bit more on the defense before I had that wholeness and that love.
Yeah.
And wanting to prove, because all I was wanting to do is to feel like I was enough so that I could have that love.
It's a metric of value, right? It's like you're searching for a sense of fulfillment and what you mean to everybody else, until you realize that really it stops at the end of the look of your kid and of your family. Like after that, it doesn't go any further than that.
It's so cliche. It's so primal. I mean, I climbed every mountain, and I was looking for this view, and I have this view now. And so Woman's World really came from that. It came from this, like, wow. After I gave birth, I always respected my mother, but after I gave birth, there was this huge level of growth of respect for her. Just like watching her as I grew up, all the invisible work that she did, how she raised 3 kids without iPads. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And just how women are unstoppable. They create life. They carry life. They do it with beauty. They do it with grace. They are not one thing. They are soft. They are strong. They are chaos.
Mm-hmm.
They are cool. They're all the things, and they contribute so much to the world. And I feel so celebrated in my life, and I hope that other women feel celebrated when they hear this, and that everybody connects to the feminine part of them inside of it.
Lowe opens the interview with effusive praise, lauding Katy Perry's performance and her emotional growth as a mother. She speaks then candidly about how motherhood has changed her, how it unlocked her feminine divine, and how Woman's World came from a deep respect for women and their power. It is a perfect moment to acknowledge the backlash here. How does she reconcile that artistic intent, that messaging, with the fact that the song was co-produced by Dr. Luke, a figure widely accused of enabling the exact opposite of female empowerment? But Zane Lowe doesn't ask. He doesn't even gesture at the controversy. The conversation stays safely rooted in vibes. He echoes her sentiment about celebrating women, talks about his wife, and segues into more spiritual nonsense about love and joy. It's literally like watching a magician wave his hand over a smoke bomb and insist, nothing to see here.
And the music you played the other day when we were listening to songs in varying states of being finished and unfinished was like, this is like Katy Perry energy on peak.
I'm full up now. So I am creating from a place of happiness and wholeness, which is super rare, I think, and scary for artists, because I think the biggest lie that we've ever been sold is that we have to stay in pain in order to create great art. But once you're full up, you're operating from light and joy and like beauty, and you can share that with the world. Now, Woman's World is not the whole record, right? And I know you got to hear some of the record. It's actually truly, I think, the bridge for me. It's the bridge because...
From where to where, though? Where's it bridging from to get to this place today?
I think that people, when they think of me, they think of Roar, they think of Firework. Sometimes they think of I Kissed a Girl, but I think mostly they think of these kind of empowering songs with a message, songs that are like captions on t-shirts and stuff like that, or things that help people get through. And I love that. I love hearing the stories. And really, I write these songs from a place where I need to get through something. So I wanted to continue with that. And also, this is the first contribution I've given since becoming a mother and since feeling really connected to my feminine divine. So I wanted to start with that. Now, that feminine divine has unlocked a lot of other things. It's unlocked this like grounded sexuality, this strength. It's a security.
Even when Katy introduces deeper themes like feeling full up after becoming a mother, Zane Lowe doesn't challenge her to engage with the backlash her empowerment anthem received. Instead, he rides this high. He says, "This is Katy Perry energy on peak." There's no pushback, no curiosity about the tension between the public perception of what she's doing and the way that she feels so full up inside. Instead, we just get affirmations. You sound whole. You sound joyful. The spiritual language, as it so often does, becomes a shield, and Zane never once attempts to look behind it. And here's what makes this example even more disheartening. Zane Lowe is not an influencer. He's one of the last remaining figures from the old guard of music journalism with access to a wide range of artists, someone with also a long history of asking thoughtful, incisive, and sometimes surprising questions. He is definitely capable of depth and nuance, and has proven this across many interviews in the past, particularly when he likes something. But in this case, he didn't, or perhaps couldn't, go there. To his credit, he does work for Apple Music, which is a platform that thrives on maintaining pristine relationships with artists and their teams. And so even a seasoned interviewer like Zane, who no doubt, I'm sure he's not stupid, had deeper and harder questions in the back of his mind, chose not to risk the discomfort of upsetting his relationship with Katy Perry, her team, and with his company. It's not considered kosher to challenge the artist anymore. You must kiss the ground they walk on. Now, let's move on to the 143 interview. Longer, deeper in runtime, but somehow just as shallow in substance.
My joy can never be taken away because my joy is no longer outside of myself.
Exactly. We don't own that.
No one owns it
No one
anymore.
else owns
It's not
that.
outside of myself. That really switched around witness time. It seemed like it was really jolting because I was really trying to clean the palette and do something different than I was doing. That's why I dramatically shifted everything, because I just wanted to explore other territories. I didn't want to keep repeating myself. It was a necessary shift. Sometimes they say, like, when you're on a like a ship, if it shifts 1 degree, you can land on a different continent.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it can feel like, even if it's by 1 degree. But I'm just so grateful because it got me out of this loop.
Every great artist has a witness. Every great artist has an album in their catalog, at least one, which at the time to some fans requires some readjustment, where we go, okay, but we were in a rhythm with you. We were there.
Yeah.
We were right there.
Yeah.
What we didn't realize at the time was we were already ready to move on as well.
Yeah.
It's just we needed you to show us how to do that.
Oh,
and
thanks.
those albums like Witness are really important because they establish an entire, like you say, it's a degree off course.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it as fans until you're 2 or 3 albums down the
Yeah.
road. Like, oh, it makes sense.
There's a glimmer of self-awareness when Katy says that she shifted her sound drastically with Witness. But rather than asking Katy what it cost her creatively, critically, commercially, Zane Lowe instead offers a theory and a cop-out. Every great artist has a witness. The interview now becomes myth-making, not journalism. That's not a question or a comment, it's a spin. Witness was a public rejection of Katy Perry. The album, especially in comparison to its predecessors at the time, performed horribly and damaged her reputation catastrophically. We are literally still seeing the impacts of that fallout today. The story beneath what Katy is saying here is, I'm hoping this album will right whatever wrongs I've done with the albums that people hated in the past and restore people's fond memories of me. But Zane, first of all, dismisses this interesting train of thought by simply discounting it and going, well, every great artist has a witness. Not every great artist has a witness, first of all. Sidestepping any further questioning on how that rejection impacted Katy's artistry, how much she was thinking of that when she created this new flop record, which has, by every metric imaginable, flopped even harder than Witness did. He doesn't ask, he doesn't follow up, he doesn't redirect, he doesn't push. And what's the result? Well, the result is a dull, deeply shallow interview that is full of emptiness. You're a manifester. You're the most centered you've ever been. This is a joyful album. There's no insight here. There's no engagement with what people are actually hearing or saying and feeling about this music as it goes out into the world. You would never know just from this interview alone, viewed in isolation, say we're looking back at this in 50 years in a time capsule, that this was a legacy artist returning from a huge creative low point, reaching a new one, carrying baggage, expectations, and having something to prove. The stakes are high around this specific scenario, but the tone in the interview is, again, kind of gaslighting the audience. Katy is breezy, fun, happier than she's ever been. She's simply making good music. Meanwhile, her career is rotting and disintegrating in real time. Compare this to what we talked about earlier with Frank Sinatra Has a Cold. There, the journalist has no access, no affirmation, and no interest in flattery. And still, actually, because of that, He produced something enduring, something cutting, something true, something insightful. Now, I think we have too much access. There's too much affirmation, too much brand protection around artists, and it's killing conversation. When we stop challenging artists, we stop understanding them, we stop documenting them, and we stop giving our future generations anything meaningful to work with on the historical record. What's the point of creating it if we don't ask what it means? And ironically, the only person who did bring up the Dr. Luke controversy was Alex Cooper. But let's be clear, that's not a win. By the time Katy went on Call Her Daddy, that was strategy. By the time Katy's album had flopped and the criticism around her choice of collaborators refused to die down, it was damage control mode. So she went on Call Her Daddy, a platform her team could trust to give her space and not push back. Cooper would not challenge her. She would let her speak uninterrupted and peddle whatever narrative she wanted to sell. And that is exactly what happened. Towards the very end of the interview, Alex Cooper finally brings up the elephant in the room with a very carefully worded question. A lot of people have expressed disappointment and were really upset that you decided to involve Dr. Luke on this album. Why did you choose to work with him? It's an open-ended question. Katy responds with a carefully managed answer about empowerment and creative control. She brushes off the fact that he was a main collaborator and tries to downplay his part by saying he was just one of many on the record, and pivots quickly to motherhood and personal growth. And then Alex Cooper drops the subject. No follow-up, no clarification. What could she have done here? She could have said, do you understand why people are upset? No mention of Kesha, no mention of the optics of working with someone like that on a song like Woman's World, not even a gentle, how are you navigating this backlash as you're putting out a new project? It is the most half-hearted confrontation imaginable. In fact, it's not even a confrontation. I know for sure that Katy Perry's team wrote that question, put it in Alex Cooper's hands, and she asked it and did not follow up. Minutes later, they're chatting about Roombas, toilet seats, and blowjobs. Katy Perry might have actually been forced to say something here, but the platform and the person who she chose to interview her ensured that she wouldn't have to actually defend herself. And this is how the modern celebrity interview works. You pick your platform based on how little resistance they are known to offer. Zane Lowe might have asked a hard question if he were allowed. I don't think he would, but Alex Cooper wouldn't even think to ask the question. And so no one ever really gets to meaningfully push back on Katy Perry at all. As legacy media declines and traditional music journalism is struggling to stay afloat, influencers and entertainers have stepped in to do the job of interviewing. Some of today's biggest artist interviewers come from podcasts like Call Her Daddy, hosted by the aforementioned Alex Cooper, or culturally savvy, personality-driven shows like Las Culturistas with Matt Rogers and Bowen Yang. These formats are casual, friendly, and often rooted in fan culture rather than journalistic integrity, which is fine as long as you're not trying to brand yourself as a journalistic outlet. Alex Cooper, in particular, is emblematic of this shift and of everything that's wrong with it. Her interviews, though increasingly high profile, are rarely about the person that she's speaking to or their work in any meaningful sense. Her skills as an interviewer are shockingly underdeveloped, and her complete lack of curiosity in her guests and in getting better at her job borders on negligence. And yet, she continues to land guests who are at critical junctures in their careers. Pop stars with stories to tell, tensions to explore, and rare windows into fame, artistry, and transformation. Hell, she even got the vice president on. And yet, she squanders those opportunities for insight and clarity again and again. Let's take her interview with Avril Lavigne, for example. The moment this conversation begins, as always, Alex Cooper defines herself as the biggest fan of whoever she's speaking to, which feels disingenuous when you hear it every single time she talks to someone. She launches into this long-winded monologue about her own childhood fandom, including how she used to make music videos to Avril Lavigne's songs. This could have been, I guess, a brilliant segue into a deeper discussion of Avril's early visuals, her creative direction, or even her influence on a generation of young artists making their own music videos now. But instead, Alex Cooper stays firmly within her own anecdote, never once pivoting that into a substantial question. She just wanted to get it out there for us all to hear. She dominates the first several minutes of this conversation with personal memories, instead of using her access to gain insight into Avril's legacy. What's worse is that the timing of this interview was really crucial, and it was an easy layup for her. It coincided with the 20th anniversary of Under My Skin, one of Avril's most iconic and critically underrated albums. She was also on her greatest hits tour. She was also going to perform at Glastonbury. This was the time to be retrospective. And there was an open door with this 20th anniversary, a clear opportunity to make news, reflect on Avril's legacy, and hear her contextualize her past work by herself. In fact, Avril hadn't even really been asked about it before. This was the easiest exclusive in the world. But Alex Cooper never even mentions those three words, Under My Skin. Instead, she steers the conversation towards the tired internet rumor that Avril died and was replaced by a clone named Melissa. Avril predictably finds this exhausting and absurd, and the segment is short because there's not much to say about it. Alex belabors the point to a point of discomfort. And the same thing happens again in Alex Cooper's interview with Chappell Roan. This was another rare opportunity. Chappell Roan had just exploded into stardom and hadn't yet done an in-depth interview about the year that had just changed her life. Alex could have asked her about the whirlwind of fame, the pressures of becoming a queer icon, the making of Good Luck Babe, the release of The Giver, or what's coming next. But instead, she offers us nothing. She nods. She compliments Chappell's outfits. She reads all of her questions off the note cards. She doesn't address the new song until an hour into the interview. Even when Chappell offers a deeply vulnerable moment to Alex, saying that she lost her shine after this year and that fame had somewhat drained her of the joyful expression that she once found in fashion and drag, Alex Cooper doesn't know how to handle Chappell Roan going off the script of what Alex had planned for her to talk about. Her response is a bizarre and tone-deaf pivot. What's the most Midwestern thing about you? Chappell had just experienced a profound shift in her sense of self, and Alex Cooper responds with a personality quiz. It's insulting to her subject, and it is extremely exasperating for the viewer. After all, this is not just a chat between two friends. Alex Cooper and Call Her Daddy are asking you to listen and pay attention and trust that she can steer the conversation. Her greatest flaw is her refusal or her inability to actually listen. She doesn't follow up. She doesn't adapt. She doesn't pivot. When her guests offer her something real, she glances down at her cue cards, gets nervous about having to come up with her own line of conversation, and moves on. It's not just bad interviewing, it's lazy, it's careless, and it's disrespectful to the artist and to the audience. It's clear that Alex wants her guests to think that she's cool and relatable, maybe even their friend. That's fine if you're running a fan podcast or doing a 5-minute TikTok. But Alex Cooper is very actively trying to brand Call Her Daddy as the definitive place for serious cultural conversations. She's trying to play journalist without doing the work of journalism or embodying any of the core traits that journalists have. There is no intellectual curiosity. There is no narrative arc. There is no critical engagement. There's vibes, there's platitudes, and there's missed opportunities. This kind of unseriousness is what happens when we confuse access with insight and likability with credibility. Just because you have someone in front of you doesn't mean you're going to get something interesting out of them. And just because that person likes you doesn't mean that they're going to trust you to say something they wouldn't say in another circumstance. What Alex Cooper does is a dereliction of duty. It's everything that journalism and music journalism shouldn't be. It's not just that she asks bad questions. It's that, like with Katy Perry, she actively avoids good ones. She doesn't chase the thread. She doesn't press for clarity. She doesn't allow her subjects the space to fully articulate themselves. She does not understand the power of silence. She's always talking a mile a minute to fill that. In moments when an artist begins to open up or to say something that could lead to deeper insight, she retreats. She pivots abruptly, or she injects herself into the moment, or she just reads the next pre-written question on her cards. She doesn't behave like Gay Talese or Diane Sawyer, like someone who is in the room to uncover a story. She behaves like someone who's trying not to mess up a selfie. Nowhere is this more evident than in her interview with Chappell Roan that we've been talking about, who is a rising star at a turning point emotionally, artistically, and culturally. I want to pay a little bit more attention to this interview because it is full of moments that could have sparked profound conversations about fame, queerness, burnout, sexuality, or artistic identity, but every single thread is left to die on the vine. This is one of the most boring interviews I've ever heard in my entire life, and that is not Chappell Roan's fault. Here are just a few examples of the opportunities Alex Cooper squandered for follow-up questions.
I think people are scared of me.
Really?
I think I made a big enough deal about not talking to me that people do not talk to me. That's, I think, the truth of it all. And I've been with people, like friends who are like artists, and they're like, when they're with me, they're like, it's a force field around us. People don't come up to me if I'm with you. And I think I'm just like, damn, say, baby, you say it too. You say, don't touch me. Don't touch me. Don't look at me. Don't talk to me. I don't know who you are. And they won't come up to bother you.
What a concept. That is hilarious, though, that other celebrities are like, look at what you did.
It's a force field. And I'm not just by one person, by like three or four.
Do you
like,
love it that you said it?
It hurts that I have to.
Yeah.
It hurts. I know it really hurts people because they take it really, they feel like it's me disrespecting them, that I owe it to them, and that how dare I call it abuse. And it's like, or complaining about success. I get that a lot.
This is a moment of eerie self-awareness where Chappell says she's talking about fans and the boundaries she's trying to draw with them. I think people are scared of me. I made a big enough deal about not talking to me in public that people do not talk to me. What she's doing here is describing a kind of fame-induced isolation, how putting up boundaries for survival also creates this emotional distance between her and her audience. She even acknowledges that it hurts to be perceived as someone who wants to hurt her fans, but she doesn't know how else to protect herself. She mentions that she understands that people feel like she's disrespecting them and that she owes it to them, but she disagrees with that premise. This is an open and complex emotional paradox. Chappell Roan is caught between the need for safety and the desire for connection, and between boundaries and also gratitude. Alex Cooper, again, drops the ball. There's no follow up. There's no curiosity about how Chappell is navigating this contradiction. There's no probing of what it means to be both admired and alienated. Alex could have asked her how that force field that she's created around her shapes her relationships with people in her real life, or if she fears becoming unapproachable even to those that she loves. Instead, she smiles, she moves on, and lets another powerful thread go unaddressed. Her very next words, okay, this is a fun one, before launching into a prompt about who Chappell Roan's favorite celebrity encounter has been. One of the most boring facets of celebrity interviews is them talking about other celebrities unless they're working together. It's like, okay, you're all famous and you hang out together, thanks. The whiplash here is crazy. Let's talk about the motherhood moment, because this is what has pissed people off and is making Chappell go viral, and is also a dereliction of duty by Alex Cooper. Chappell opens a controversial but revealing line of thought when she reflects on her friends back home, many of whom are mothers. She says,
all of my friends who have kids are in hell. I don't know anyone. I actually don't know anyone who's like happy and has children at this age. I literally have not met anyone who's happy, anyone who has like light in their eyes, anyone who has slept.
This is a very charged observation, one that clearly stems from a real concern and not just a flippant cynicism, even though Chappell sometimes comes across as being a little bit flippant just in the way she delivers her words. Chappell Roan, lest we forget, is from Missouri. She grew up middle working class, and the friends that she's talking about here likely come from similar backgrounds to her. Young mothers in their early 20s, raising kids on limited income in a part of the country that's often condescended to or forgotten entirely, not exactly cosmopolitan beacons of progressiveness, in a nation openly hostile to mothers with little to no structural support for young families. Her observation here is both emotionally raw and politically loaded. There are things to unpack, and if you give her the opportunity, maybe you'll get at that. It was an opening to explore the generational expectations, economic hardship, societal neglect, and the pressure that women and queer women face when it comes to conforming, confronting, or trying to assess a traditional family structure. But Alex Cooper, who has clearly not done the necessary research and was not dynamic enough to improvise a real question in the moment, pivots awkwardly. Instead of engaging with the emotional or cultural weight of what has just been said, she asks whether Chappell's friends think her fame is wild, or if they just treat her like a regular friend. It is a baffling redirection. Chappell Roan was handing over a raw, complicated idea that could have created a really interesting and unique conversation. But instead, Alex Cooper is scared that the conversation will run away from her, so she backs away and opts for something safe and generic. This refusal to engage is part of what fuels the backlash that Chappell Roan is now facing. Without thoughtful context, her comments about motherhood feel harsh. Alex had the opportunity to humanize and clarify them, and she didn't take it. And that actually is her fault, because it's her job and responsibility to make sure that her interviewees are getting to express themselves fully by asking good questions and steering the conversation productively. Bad interviews don't just waste an opportunity, they can actively harm an artist's image. That's the irony at the heart of these influencer-led press cycles. I think that publicists book their clients on shows like Call Her Daddy thinking, this is the safest route. It's a big platform. This girl ain't too, she's not all there. She won't press us too hard. But what happens when the host isn't just soft, but unskilled? The conversation doesn't stay easy and flattering. It gets awkward, it gets aimless, and sometimes even damaging. Vulnerabilities are mishandled, emotional disclosures go unacknowledged or unexplained, and the artist ends up looking disjointed or uncomfortable, not because they are, but because the interviewer just didn't know how to hold the space for them. Alex Cooper's incompetence doesn't just flatten the story here, it distorts it. And in some cases, it leaves artists wide open to backlash. And that is exactly what happened with Chappell Roan. She's been taking enormous heat online for a flippant comment that she made about motherhood in an offhand moment that with a better interviewer could have been softened, contextualized, or redirected entirely. And instead it was left hanging, left to spiral. Because when you hand someone a platform this powerful, you're handing them a responsibility. Alex Cooper isn't up to holding that responsibility. A lot of people in the comments of my TikTok were saying, well, Call Her Daddy is just girl talk for the daddy gang. And to that I say, pick a lane, because Alex Cooper doesn't market this show as just a hangout anymore. She wants it both ways. In fact, she wants it more in the journalism direction. She wants the credibility of a hard-hitting interviewer and the low-stakes freedom of a chill chat podcast. But you cannot have both. They are, in fact, mutually exclusive. Just watch her New York Times business interview to hear her opine more about this. She talks as though she is the Gen Z Barbara Walters, and she brags about, interviewing the Vice President of the United States. She talks about wanting to build a media empire that's supposed to be credible, intentional, and this is the funniest part of it all, built on listening deeply to guests. She even claims that she does more research than ever and that every conversation is designed to move culture forward. Does that sound like someone who just wants to chat with the girls? No. Even her set gives off the illusion of prestige, sleek, minimal, softly lit, designed to feel just journalistic enough for an audience to perceive it as so, but comfortable for a celebrity to sit there and open up. She sits across from pop stars and politicians. Compare the set and the tone of her show to something like Jake Shane or Drew Afualo's shows. You know what you're getting there. The tone is very clear. Alex Cooper, on the other hand, presents herself as the definitive Gen Z interviewer, and that illusion is exactly the problem. Because when people defend her show by saying it's not meant to be serious, they're not just letting her off the hook, they're misunderstanding the brand she built. So she's, marketing herself wrong. If she wants to be seen as a cultural commentator, if she wants to be seen as someone who stewards meaningful conversations, then she has to be held to a higher standard. Because when she fails, and she fails often, it's not harmless, it's negligent. And with hundreds of millions of dollars pumped into this operation, there is no excuse that after years of doing these interviews, she is not getting better at them. And it's very bad for the artists that she claims to champion, that they are subjected to this misbehavior. And this is how you really know that Call Her Daddy is failing at being the culture-moving, scoopy platform that it thinks it is. Think of the impact that Oprah's interview with Meghan Markle had on the world, the moments it created, the spotlight that it put not only on Meghan and Harry, but also on Oprah's chops as an interviewer, her ability to manage the conversation. Call Her Daddy never goes viral for anything Alex Cooper does. It's never a question that she asks, an interaction that's interesting, a rapport between her and the guest. It's not a follow-up that cracks something open, not a sharp or timely observation from her. When Call Her Daddy trends, it's because the guest did something chaotic, like Cole Sprouse chain smoking and spiraling, or because a quote gets clipped wildly out of context, like Chappell Roan's motherhood comment. These moments are not arising from a great interview. They're happening despite the show, not because of it. And that's not journalism. That's capturing a car crash and saying, look at this documentary. What can Alex Cooper do to fix this? Learn or pack it up. She is not a lost cause. She's just untrained. But she kind of is a lost cause, in my opinion, because she has had so many opportunities to turn this around, and mediocrity is just something that she seems unable to clear. However, the good news is there are incredible role models around her, including in the very same social media space that she dominates. The rise of personality-driven interviews doesn't have to mean the fall of the craft. If anything, it's an opportunity to reinvent it, because when a good interviewer shows up, curious and prepared and genuinely listening, the result isn't just content, it's connection, clarity, and culture. I want to pivot to an example of someone who gets it right. Here's Louis Theroux. In his interview with Jade Thirlwall from Little Mix, he demonstrates the art of asking uncomfortable questions without causing his subject to shut down. The context: Jade is speaking about Jessie Nelson, a former member of Little Mix who left the group in 2020 under intense public scrutiny. There was a lot of fallout between the four girls after this happened, and a lot of tension and conversations around blackfishing and cultural appropriation. In the past, most interviewers that have tried to approach this topic have either, skirted around it entirely or been stonewalled by the girls, Perry, Leanne, and Jade, when they tried to talk about it. But Louis manages to crack Jade open in a way that she has not spoken about this in 4 whole years, while she's on a record cycle. Why? Because he listens. He earns her trust in real time, and he knows how to guide his subject without overwhelming them. He gently brings up Jessie's exit by saying,
It was you, Leanne, Perry, and Jessie.
Yes.
Jessie left. That was a high-profile thing.
Yeah.
How much can you say about that?
This is textbook Louis Theroux. He's introducing the elephant in the room directly, but softly, allowing the guests to set their own boundaries. He's not fishing for gossip. He is framing this as a safe container. When discussed about her leaving the group, he asks, was she pushed? This is a blunt question, but he quickly softens it with context, acknowledging the pressures of the industry. This kind of quick modulation, hard question, immediate context, creates room for a real answer. It surprises someone into being on their toes, but comforts them and lets them know that there is an answer they can give that will be totally fine. Jade then admits all 4 of us were traumatized by that whole experience, which is something that she hadn't previously shared in detail. And this moment, as she goes on to explain it, is a direct result of Louis giving her the space to reflect and gently nudging her when she starts to trail off.
It was very hard to deal with and quite traumatic. And
It was non-speaks, was it?
Yeah, it was. I honestly, I'm not 100% sure. I think that's why I struggled with it, is because we didn't all get a chance to just sit together like we'd done for so many years, to just hash it out. There's no hate there from from me or from any of us, I think.
Louis introduces the idea that the fallout happened during COVID, suggesting miscommunication and emotional distance could have played a role in that. By offering an interpretation of what might have happened without assigning blame, he's getting her to open up and giving her a narrative framework to step into. This is empathy through structure. He's guiding Jade through this conversation. When they touch on Jesse's solo career and accusations of blackfishing, again, this is an example of, trying and maybe not really getting an answer that you want, but at least asking the question. He applies just enough pressure to elicit a response, but not so much that it feels like an ambush. Jade answers cautiously but truthfully, noting that they did discuss this issue of cultural appropriation from Jesse when the group was together. That's an interesting revelation and detail that had not been said before. This entire conversation is a case study in how to interview someone who has been burned by the media before and is cautious about it. Jade opens up throughout this whole interview about grief, therapy, ruptured friendships, and trauma, all while maintaining her dignity. And that's what good interviewing does. It reveals humanity. It does not make humanity a spectacle. Louis Theroux didn't get that moment by accident. He read the room. He watched her cues. He knew when to sit in silence, when to prompt her, and when to back off. He gave her space. He let her choose the depth. And in doing so, we got something rare. A pop star speaking from their heart instead of retreating behind a public relations script. These moments, whether it's Louis with Jade or any of the other pros we're about to touch on, show us what interviewing is actually supposed to look like. Sean Evans of Hot Ones literally interviews celebrities as they sweat through spicy wings and still manages to ask some of the best and most well-researched questions in the game. That level of preparation, that's what earns the vulnerability, and that's what gets interesting answers and collects moments that end up going viral. Amelia de Moldenberg of Chicken Shop Date disarms her guests not with seriousness, but with absurdity. Her dry delivery lures celebrities into an unexpected candor. She's not winging it here. She's performing a precision awkwardness that really makes space for interesting interactions. Z-Way is another example. She weaponizes discomfort with surgical accuracy. Her satire is sharp and her framing is deliberate, and through humor, she uses her platform to poke at power, identity, and performance. It's pink fluff on the outside and razor wire substance underneath. You don't walk away from a Z-Way interview without knowing something deeper about the subject or the culture around them. The humor offers a new way for you to think about a serious topic. And of course, the GOAT, Oprah Winfrey. She is the blueprint. She listens, she holds the space, she asks the hard questions when they matter the most, and she asks them with grace. She knows when to push, she knows when to pivot, and she knows when to just let someone speak. That's why people trust her. That's why people talk to her. That's why she gets great exclusives. That's why her conversations last. What all of these interviewers have in common, Louis, Sean, Amelia, Z-Way, Oprah, is intent. They know their role. They do their research. They show up with a purpose. They're not winging it. They're not hoping their guest will carry the conversation. They're crafting it. So here's where we land at the end of all of this. Interviewing is a craft. It's not just about access or aesthetic or how many sound bites you can farm from a studio appearance. It's about care. It's about curiosity. And it's about creating a space where something real can happen, where artists can be challenged, not cornered, supported, not smothered, seen, and not used. When we lose that, we don't just lose a good interview, we lose the archive, we lose the document, we lose the map of how fame feels in a specific moment, how culture evolves, how artists change, and why they matter in a specific time. Whether you're holding the mic or editing the cut, the job is the same. Earn your moments. Hold the space. Do the work.